Apple and Tag are helping me to welcome you to another edition of Ask the Breeder. I'm sorry that I can't get to every single question that's submitted, but I will tackle as many as I can, so let's get right to business. First question comes from Sandra M., who says, when Jamba finally meets one or more of the puppies that he sired, will they recognize each other? Will he realize that those are his puppies? He will most likely meet at least one of those puppies somewhere down the line, but you have to realize that puppies are introduced to their mother immediately after birth. It's important that they start nursing so that they get the colostrum that gives them an immunity until they can develop their own immunities and receive vaccines to develop those. But they don't have the opportunity to bond with their sire. So even though a mother will very likely recognize her son or daughter, and vice versa, the son or daughter would recognize the mother years down the line because they remember the scent, that's probably not going to happen with the sire. Our second question comes from Dr. B, who wants to know, why do so many breeders charge the same price for a show quality dog as they do for one that is not show quality, and likewise one that's used for breeding as opposed to one that's not going to be used for breeding? Well, the fact is that the price of puppies is not really driven so much by the market as it is by the cost of producing those puppies. Nowadays, we take advantage of scientific advances. We use remote collections of semen from the father, shipping, artificial inseminations, including transcervical inseminations, sometimes a surgical implantation, sometimes a cesarean section is necessary, the aftercare, including special medications, special foods, and all of that really piles into a huge negative cash flow. So breeders like me charge enough so that we don't go bankrupt producing our litters. Oh, I'm sorry, did I bop you in the nose? I'm sorry, girl. We really don't know if a puppy is going to have show potential or not. So every puppy receives the same care, both prenatal and postnatal. It really doesn't matter whether the dog has or does not have show potential. It's more a matter of the fact that it has cost quite a bit just to get that puppy into this world. Dr. B also had another question, so our third question, again, thanks Dr. B. Dr. B asks, if you are testing potential parents for a litter by a cardiologist, what test does a cardiologist perform? And how can we find clinics that would offer those tests at a reasonable price? When I deal with a young dog like Apple, who is not prone to any severe heart disease at this point, I take her to a cardiologist. We do what's called a basic cardiac clearance, where the cardiologist simply listens to her heart. It's called auscultation. Cardiologists are trained to detect even the slightest hint of a murmur coming from the mitral valve, which is where Cavalier's problems generally emanate from. And if a murmur is detected, that would be considered to be a precursor to possible heart problems, and then we would very likely not use her for breeding. If I had an older dog that I was breeding, I might do what's called the advanced cardiac clearance, which involves, besides the auscultation, an echocardiogram, which will give a very detailed result showing any degree of regurgitation or backflow of blood through the mitral valve. As far as the clinics are concerned, I think the best place to find clinics is a website called cavalierhealth.org. What you see right here is a screenshot of their website. Right up there, big letters, it says health clinics. You click on that, and then this screen comes up. This screen shows by state and by city where upcoming health clinics will be held. It's a very comprehensive list. If you find the city and the state and the date that you are interested in, you click on that little blue link, and that will give you all the details. It'll tell you if it's a heart clinic, if eye tests are also performed, x-rays, microchip clinics, whatever else might be offered, who to contact, and how much it will cost. You'll find it's a substantial savings over going to a cardiologist's office. Our fourth question comes from WT, who says, when I see videos like the ones we've just been showing of Jamba's puppies, of young puppies while they're nursing, lying down, why is it their legs are always splayed out like a frog? Well, you have to understand that when a puppy is born, its bone structure is nowhere near fully developed. Here's an x-ray of an approximately 4-week-old puppy. You'll notice that the bones in that leg are not connected. They are apart. And actually, when the puppy's born, they're even further apart than what you see there. It takes up to the age of 9 to 14 months for a Cavalier. For bigger breeds, takes even longer, for that bone structure to come together. You look very carefully at those bones, you'll see a little white tip at the end of each bone. That's called the growth plate. And the growth plates very, very slowly develop. So when you have puppies that are 3 or 4 weeks old, they don't have the joint connections to support their weight, being able to lift up or even just flex their legs properly. So they lie down on their stomachs and the legs just flop out behind them because those connections are not there. Our fifth question comes from Chauga, I'm not sure how to pronounce that username, who asks, is there a good seatbelt to use when you're transporting your dog in the car? First of all, don't transport your dog without any kind of restraint whatsoever. You should realize that if you have a collision or an emergency stop, your dog is effectively going to be a projectile and can be smashed against the dashboard, the windshield, or any other part of your car and severely injured. I also think back to an experience a friend of mine had when she unfortunately was involved in a multi-car collision on a highway. The car was damaged pretty severely, the door popped open, the dog was unrestrained, ran out, and now, besides facing the consequences of the collision, she had to chase down her dog and make sure her dog was not run down by cars that were still moving on the highway. I think the best restraint is a crate. Here's what it looks like on the inside of my car when I am preparing to transport any of my dogs. You'll notice the wire crate is there, and it is positioned so that it's up against the back of the front seats. I have the back seats folded down, and so if I do have an emergency stop, that dog is not going to move more than a few inches because the crate's going nowhere. If you prefer to have your dog in the seat next to you, there are a number of devices you can use. I do not recommend attaching a neck collar to the seat belt. I think neck collars are great for walking dogs, but in terms of transporting them, you don't want to put pressure on the neck if there is a collision. Apple is very nicely modeling for us. It's a little bit big on her because this was actually for our older dogs. A harness that fits so that the cushioned fabric part is up against her chest, and then the belts attached to it are clipped here, and we have these two little, whoa, Apple, these two little eyelets that can be attached to this restraint with a clip. The other end can be fastened to the seat belt, and this thing even has some give in it. But if there is a collision or an emergency stop, you will notice that I can actually lift Apple up by that, and it's not putting any undue strain on any part of her body. It's putting it right by the center of mass of her body, so that there's a minimal chance of her being injured. That's the best kind of restraint to use if you're not going to transport your dog in a crate. So thank you very much for that important question, Chahuga. And our last question comes from Neshgai. This is an unusual question. Neshgai says, I have a 1-year-old who can go up and down stairs but will not jump up on the sofa. How do I teach him to do this? Well, first of all, most people don't want their dog to jump up on the sofa. I do. I like to have them. Cavaliers are lap dogs. They should be with me on the sofa when I'm sitting there. And I make sure I get sofas that can't be easily ruined or stained by the dogs. Cavaliers, I think, especially, are most easily trained using food as an incentive. I do not do this with very young puppies. Very young puppies don't, as we saw a few minutes ago, have the bone structure in their legs to cushion a fall when they go off of the couch after they're done sitting with you. They will very often try to brace themselves with their legs and hit the ground with their chin. That's how our boy Mulligan injured himself. And you can read all about how Mulligan injured himself by, Apple, reading what book?
Mulligan Man Finds His Purpose.
Written by whom?
My mommy.
Yes, written by your mommy, my wife, and illustrated by Alyssa, right? And Mulligan actually sustained that injury when he was a young puppy, tried to jump off the sofa, and didn't have the bone structure in his legs to cushion that fall, and his jaw hit the ground. Very often puppies will do that and not get injured, but it was just very unfortunate with him. But if you have an older puppy or younger dog, you want to teach to come up on the sofa. If you really want to do it, make sure you have a treat handy, small treat. You don't want to get them fat. Make sure that there's enough room for the dog to come up onto the couch, because they don't want to come up to a crowded place. So I make room. Now Apple should be able to do this pretty quickly because I think Tag wants to get into the act. Apple, come up. Come on, up on the couch. And you should be assured that in the evening, if I'm sitting watching television and I want her up on my lap, I don't even have to have a treat. She's already been trained when I say come up to come up. So thank you everybody for those wonderful questions. I wish I had more time, but keep them coming. I will get to as many as I possibly can. Meanwhile, Apple, shall we say goodbye to everybody?
Bye, everybody.
Well, you can face the camera when you do it. Say goodbye.
Okay, bye.
That's good. Okay, thank you, and I hope everybody's doing well.